Tom, let me start with you because we had heard from the head of a hospital in Wuhan city that perhaps a turning point had been reached when it came to these new infections. Now, you're on the ground in Beijing. You have been around the capital. Is that the sense that you get there?
Well, the sense I get here talking to Chinese friends and contacts is that they really don't trust the numbers that are coming from the government in terms of the rated infections. Look, the latest numbers for today, an additional 2,048 cases, as you say, globally then more than 70,000 cases. And as you rightly point out, then the death toll, according to these data points at least, 1,770. But there's a lack of trust, certainly here on the ground, amongst people when it comes to the infection rate and whether or not, frankly, they can believe the government on these numbers. In terms of the policies to further restrict the movement of people, we're seeing that on the ground here in the capital. We went outside of the city. There are roadblocks in place now preventing people who are not residents of villages or townships from entering those places, roads that are sealed off. So clearly, officials here in the capital and on the outskirts are concerned that this virus could spread here. And in Wuhan and Hubei specifically, of course, we've seen more draconian measures put in place by officials there who have told families that they are not allowed to leave their homes unless it's an emergency, and that private cars are banned from the entire province, a population of 60 million people. And most businesses there as well are to remain closed. You talked about the PBOC, the MLF operations. Of course, the central bank has been keen to ensure there is enough liquidity in the system to ensure there aren't financial shocks, particularly to the market. And what we heard from the finance minister over the weekend was that he wants to see additional cuts to taxes and fees. But really, that raises the question of how much firepower China really has in terms of fiscal stimulus, given that we know that provinces, in terms of their revenue streams, are already constrained. And so that raises another question. Will China have to raise its deficit ratio as well? Something we'll be looking ahead to.
Yeah, with the business and factory shutdowns, just no tax revenue coming in at the moment, right? Yvonne, let me get to you. It's not just China talking about these fiscal planning measures or fiscal expansion measures. We're also hearing similar sentiment from Hong Kong and Singapore looking to open up those coffers.
Yeah, even before this outbreak, we were expecting at least bold measures from Hong Kong, some sizable budgets from Singapore, due to the threat of the trade war, of course, with Hong Kong, months of political protests. But this virus now only adds to the urgency for more fiscal spending. And in Hong Kong's case, they are now proposing at least $3.2 billion in fresh funding for the fiscal year. This is after we learned from the financial secretary, Paul Chan, warning of these tsunami-like shock to the economy. And this virus could have a bigger effect that goes far beyond the likes of F&B, retail, and the tourism-related industries. The budget coffers, as you mentioned, a lot of questions whether there is the room for that. The shortfall, according to Paul Chan, will likely continue for some time. And on Tuesday, the Singaporean government are likely to deliver a strong budget. Analysts are predicting that the budget deficit could be the widest we've seen, or the biggest we've seen in almost 2 decades. That fiscal gap could widen to 1.5% of GDP. And the likes of Citigroup predicting that this economic package could be more than $500 million, which is 3 times more than what the Singaporean government spent back in 2003, the SARS epidemic.
And Tom, you spoke earlier about, how degraded in some respects the social trust and trust in the government is, and the numbers that we're seeing at the moment, right? How is that playing through in terms of the leadership? Because there's yet more confusion in terms of Xi's response, or even kind of when he began handling this crisis.
Absolutely. Another signal that officials here, senior leaders, are trying to reshape the narrative again. And that latest signal came out over the weekend. Of course, over last week, they changed the officials. They changed the party leadership in Wuhan and Hubei. They changed the methodology in terms of counting the virus. And now, over the weekend, they came out with a speech that President Xi apparently gave on February the 3rd, saying that he's been taking control of the situation since January the 7th, that he was issuing orders to local officials, that it was him, the president, who said that the city of Wuhan should be put on lockdown. So trying to show, you would assume, that the president and his team were in control, were being decisive, because, of course, they have faced pressure and criticism that it's been badly handled and that there was, according to some, a cover-up, of course, and that was in focus with the death of the whistleblower Dr. Li Wenliang. So trying to show that the president is being decisive, but this raises questions, the publication of this speech, because if Xi Jinping was issuing these orders on January the 7th, why did he wait until January the 20th to make any public announcements about the coronavirus, to publicly inform the people of China about the severity of this virus? That remains a question. And again, it underscores the fact that this is a political situation, a political pressure point, a political challenge for China's leaders, as much as it is an economic and a healthcare system challenge. This is something that the president will have to wrestle with. It may not pose, and is very unlikely to pose, a significant threat to the Communist Party, but what it may do is lead to discussions within the party, and that may lead to additional pressure on China's leader.
And Yvonne, before we go, just give us the latest on that cruise ship that's being quarantined and docked in Yokohama, Japan.
Yeah, the Diamond Princess, we learned the last couple of hours, the first charter flights that were flying out of Japan into the U.S. have taken off this morning. This is after we saw the U.S., the likes of Canada and Hong Kong, moving to evacuate their citizens off this ship after we saw another 70 cases confirmed on the Diamond Princess. And what we're learning so far is that when it comes to those who tested positive, they'll be taken to hospitals in Japan. Those who tested negative will be on these charter flights where they will be quarantined for 2 weeks at Air Force bases in the U.S., California and Texas is what we've learned. And those who did not jump on these flights, they are going to be remain in quarantine for another 14 days or so before they can fly out, do more testing. We do understand that not everyone on board has been tested just yet, and it does take a couple days for those results to come out.